Hello and welcome to another special edition of Past Your Bedtime in collaboration with TwoCan Mentoring. My name's Bev. Continuing over the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking to a number of people across the agricultural sector who've taken the opportunity to seek out the help of a mentor to support them in the next phase of their career. Mentoring, as distinct from coaching and training, is very much a two-way street, allowing both parties to steer the learnings as the situation dictates. But the TwoCan programme also provides for some structured learning, as well as an invaluable network of like-minded people looking to support, share and connect. A recurring theme in these interviews is just how effective the matching process is between mentor and mentee. During onboarding, both mentors and mentees go through the same process, outlining their career journey, goals and reasons for joining the programme. Looking at the whole person and conducting an in-depth interview ensures that not only are specific skills considered, but that personal values are surfaced, moving beyond matching simply based on job titles alone. Aligning characteristics, learning styles and behavioural dimensions make for a truly strong connection. My guests today are Beth Proctor from KWS and John Bates, a senior communications advisor working across the private and public sectors. Beth and John found common ground in discussing various communication challenges, such as those encountered when managing new starters. In Beth's role, she annually takes on new hires, often students who've never had a job before, where communicating effectively is of key importance during the busy summer schedule. Often, Beth's sporting activities were a useful bridge to discover the language of leadership and how different approaches could be used. It's also clear to hear that John got an awful lot out of this process too, illustrating what it is to be a mentor and full of admiration for Beth's openness to learning. Here we are, starting off with a bit of background. So lovely to see you both again. Beth, I want to start with you today. Give me a little bit of an overview of what you do, and then I'd like to sort of move on to why it was that you chose mentoring at this stage in your career.
So I am a senior trials technician working for KWS, which is one of the leading plant breeders in the UK. So developing the varieties of wheat, barley, oilseed rape that farmers will be growing in 5 to 10 years' time. So then I'm responsible for the trials, testing of those new potential lines, and I'm responsible for the trials all over the country. So I manage our barley trials and make sure that we get good quality trials to the breeders and collate all the scores and all the information for that. Why did I choose mentoring? Well, I was at cereals a couple of years ago, and in fact, my winter barley breeder, who I work with closely, said, "Oh, there's AHDB are doing a women in farming and mentoring talk at cereals. Oh, do you want to come along?"
All right.
All right, yep, I'll come along. And on the panel, one of the people on the panel was Helen, and she was talking through finishing her Nuffield and launching TwoCan at the time. So that was really interesting. And I thought her idea, like the way she talked about it and bringing people in from different companies and different perspectives and pairing them together was really interesting, because quite often when you hear like mentoring programs, like they can be great, but they can be internalized within your company, and then like I wonder about like if there's kind of things, identities that are very, or ideas that are very big in that company, then are you going to look at other alternatives to them
Outside.
And it was a way of like progressing my career and looking at building on kind of a lot the skills I wanted to build on and include were mainly like a lot of like communication and people management and career progression, and particularly like the communication and people management stuff. I think you can be good at it, but you can always be better, and I think it's something that you could continue to evolve and grow.
And useful to look outside of your current employment situation, because baggage that comes with that because you've got existing working relationships. That's the way I look at it. Interesting. So that was a couple of years ago. John, if you wouldn't mind giving me a bit about your background and how you came to find out about TwoCan yourself as well.
I have been working in communications for a very long time. Probably started properly working in communications in the early 90s, having had a background in marketing and sales in pretty large blue chip style companies. And it started for me really just because of I was sort of in the right place at the right time, really. I specialized in hard news, so communications mostly around things like issues management and handling crisis and things like that, which at the time wasn't particularly sort of popular amongst my peers. So while they were running for cover, I found myself sort of left standing there and needed to pick it up. So that was the thing that sort of drove me towards communications. And what I found was, of course, throughout my career, as Beth has just alluded to, communications just is the sort of the golden thread that runs through everything. And we were big people businesses, so we spent a lot of time trying to recruit people, bring people into the business, develop people, and move the business forward. And again, I found myself in the limelight because that was all sort of part of the function of building the reputation of the organisation and creating a place that we felt that people were drawn towards for developing their careers. And so what I've enjoyed, I suppose, most is seeing what was probably the sort of the grubby world of PR sort of 20 or 30 years ago, sort of rather move towards being this highly polished world of communications. And boardrooms recognizing that communications is really very important, and helping managers that are early in their career grasp really the value that can be gained from tackling issues, and the way that you sort of develop yourself and interact with people is all really founded in communications.
So where did agriculture come into it for you?
So agriculture was really latterly. So I found myself in the position where I could give something back, and I saw a job advertised at the AHDB, which was not too far away from where I live in Gloucestershire. They're just over the border in Warwickshire. And I thought, I've always quite liked agriculture. I've always, probably when I grow up, I'd like to be a farmer, that sort of thing. And I sort of lived in the West Country as a boy. As I say, I live in Gloucestershire now. I spend a lot of time with farmers and on farms, but also farming is one of those things that's very high profile and it's got a lot of issues. So there were lots of boxes that started to get ticked as to why I might go and work in agriculture. So I was fortunate enough to get a job there. Spent about 10 or so years working with AHDB, and that was how I got the link to TwoCan. Our people at AHDB, they sort of recognized that there was this sort of a program that was being put together to mentor people, and they were looking for mentors and mentees. And I just thought, well, based on really how people had supported me throughout my career and how important it was to have people sort of looking over my shoulder and guiding me, I thought, well, I'll have a crack at that.
So you both went through a process of matching so that we could get the right pairing of skills and aptitude or characteristics, I think, that meant that you could help out Beth and Beth brings something to the party for you. So how did you, when you had your first interaction, how did you start to understand your respective roles in this relationship? Beth, what did you think of the matching process itself?
So the matching process was like good. I think I was in the second cohort coming through, so quite early in the process. So it was like helping to fill in the survey and then the questions at the end, and then we did the training day in York, and then John and I organised, I think we had like an informal like 20 or 30-minute meeting, and we just sat and had a conversation and got to know each other and just like kind of saw how like we interacted and how that all felt and just what we were interested in. It was just nice to have a little beginning chat and get to know each other. It's like, this isn't one of the mentoring sessions, it's just, are we compatible and is this going to work for like 20 or 30 minutes, and just what we were interested in, what I was looking at getting out of it and what I had coming up and stuff.
John, what did you hear in Beth's explanation? What stood out for you?
Well, I think looking back, I think probably the first thing I spotted was that Beth was very open. And so I quite like that, because I thought that she just came across as being somebody who I could, spend some time talking to, and we could have an honest conversation. Because I think those two ingredients are really fundamental in all of this. You've got to be sort of open, and you've got to be honest. And although Beth and I never had any difficult conversations, I just imagine that in some circumstances, a mentor and mentee relationship sometimes might get a little bit tense, and there might be some difficult conversations. And sort of throughout life, we try and avoid difficult conversations, don't we? And so what I think embarked upon was sort of a nice informal, let's sort of have a chat, let's build some structure around that, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But let's just sort of get some foundations in place so that we understand where we both are in this relationship and what it is that we're trying to get out of it. And I think from a mentor's point of view, this is really uncharted waters. You're not really quite sure where this is going to go, and what are the tangible outcomes. I've always worked in businesses where it's been really important to have an outcome at the end of the process. So probably spend a little bit of time worrying about the process, but spend an awful lot of time worrying about what the outcome is. And so I was sort of apprehensive in terms of, well, what actually am I going to give Beth, and what are her expectations? So that initial conversation settled all that down.
Were there any surprises for either of you?
Let me have a think.
Shooting from the hip, I would say that probably the surprise was that rather than us spending a huge amount of time talking about agriculture, and we expanded the conversation into other areas. So we talked. So Beth has got a very keen interest in sport, and I'm also quite interested in sport. So a lot of our analogies and a lot of our conversations sort of related to this context of sport, and then we tried to kind of swing that back to to agriculture, and how in different circumstances that just might play out as in Beth's career.
Yeah,
I think building on John's point, because particularly what I was looking at was like communications and like people management and dealing with different people and difficult situations. I play a lot of netball, so I'm involved in team sport, and I also umpire netball, so it's like good at looking at those transferable skills and bringing it across. And I think it was really nice to look at. Sometimes I think we can very much get, this is my career and these are my hobbies, and they don't actually link together. And it's actually, there is a lot of stuff you can bring across and like work together, and it's not always as two separate entities. Yeah.
Do you think so as in your umpiring capacity, do you think your leadership skills are different when you're umpiring the team to what you display at work? Did you have to change anything? Were you different, or could you then see the similarities?
I could see within netball, like the umpiring structure is basically very, if I award a decision, there's a framework you have to go through, and you go, what's happened, what the offence is, who's done it, where is it, and what the action. So it's like contact, wing attack, penalty green, stand beside the wing attack, please.
Stand prescriptive.
Yeah, it's one of those. With work, it is sometimes nice to, you can go have a little checklist in your head that you can go through and like build on this. Maybe, admittedly, because netball game, you're giving it very fast, it's clear instruction, we're moving on. Like, you wouldn't just tell how to
Weird at work.
be that direct at work. You perhaps a bit more
Although maybe the workplace needs something like that.
it does need some directness. I will admit, I have like, with us being KWS being an international business, it can be interesting getting emails from like colleagues with different cultural perspectives, and you're like, oh yes.
Yeah, that's very true. But wouldn't it be fun in the boardroom to sort of say, right, chairman, infringement, stand in the corner, see me on.
Chairman, you said you're going to speak for 5 minutes. We're now at 10.
Yes, I've certainly been in lots of meetings where a referee's whistle would have been really useful.
Or a red card.
So, building on.
So how did you approach the structure then, the framework for these sessions together?
So it was kind of, we came up with a structure together, but it was led from my side, is that I would generally send John an email the week before of 2 or 3 points of like what I wanted to go through. And it might have been as simple as like, oh, I want to chat about communication, managing like casual stuff, because we have a lot of people, so like students who come and work for us over the summer. They'll do a short-term contract from say July till September. They can range in age from 16 up to like 24, and some it's their first experience of full-time work, others are more like dealing with that, and there can be up to 40 or 50 of them. I wouldn't have that many under my control, but that working at the company at one time there can be 40 of them, so sometimes you've got little bits of politics within that. So I would just send John an email kind of normally with 2 or 3 points that I wanted to discuss, so that he could gather his thoughts and ideas together, because that would be, if I was a mentor, I would think my idea of, because I'm a bit of a planner, my idea of absolute would make me really stressed if I was walking into something and I was like, I've got a mentor meeting, but I don't know what we want to discuss or anything, because I may have the knowledge, but it's like, it may be at the, like, I may have other stuff on, it may be at the back of my head, and it's like, I know some of the details of it, but the real like fine minutiae, I might just want to double check my notes and make sure that I'm giving someone the correct facts, rather than just going off the top of my head going, okay, there's this that applies, but I can't quite remember the last little bits of detail that we need.
And that for me was an absolute sort of nugget, really, because from a structural sort of point of view, that was really helpful that Beth did that, because we went to each meeting sort of afresh. We knew what it is that we were going to try and talk about. We talked about lots of other things as well, but there was this sort of, basic agenda, if you like, that we knew that we had to tackle. So I found that really helpful from Beth, and that enabled me also just to spend a little bit of time to think about some sort of anecdotes, or just sort of some reflect back in my own sort of career as to how we might have tackled sort of any of the issues. And importantly, so one of the things that is often forgotten in communications is the importance of listening. So communications is often sort of thought about being sort of messaging and broadcasting and sort of something on the radio or television or on on socials, and often it's just about just step back and just listen. That structure gave me the opportunity to really listen to what Beth wanted to talk about.
Can you recall anything specific around a challenge, an example of a challenge?
I think so. One of the things that we talked about was, so just picking up on the point about people coming on work experience and being early in their career, for example. So one of the conversations was about clarity of expectations of those people. They want something and you want something. So it's about just setting out. So this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to happen, and this is what we need to achieve by the end of it. And your reward, the return that you get for that is, this work experience, and we can we can build on whatever it is that that you're trying to get to from this sort of short period of working. And so it was about that clarity of thought, that do some preparation before you start the conversation, listen so you understand what comes back to you, and then act on that. So be very, very clear, very, I think you use the word, prescriptive. So sometimes it's about just being, quite clear. Often things in farming aren't black and white, but there are some things that you have to do, you must do. So things like cleaning the combine, for example. The combine has to be properly cleaned before it goes out, or before it goes into storage. There are some things that just have to happen.
Recalling that, Beth, how do you feel about that task now with the seasonal workers?
Definitely, it's improved. It was really good because our 6 months mentoring finished last June. So it was really good going into harvest last year to have a structure that I could work with and build on. And what was also really nice was we talked through like listening and what the students would get out of the task and what I would. But it was also good to know that the framework I basically had was a good starting block, and I just needed to bolt bits on, which was often nice. And what I found about the mentoring process was really nice, was we could discuss stuff and how I did it, and we had, okay, this is a good base and this is how we can enhance it. Because quite often I find in work scenarios, you keep doing stuff because you think it works and it's good, but is it the best way of doing it? And generally 9 times out of 10, you only get told if something's gone wrong, not if something goes right. You just keep doing it. You don't always go, oh yeah, that was really good.
It's almost like you built your own data set for how you perform as a manager, because you've got a process going into it that you can fine tune and go back and review and see what works and what didn't work.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for this year? So I didn't realise that you'd finished this now a year ago, and here we are sort of celebrating that piece. How much of it has stayed with you, and what have you done to improve on it?
So there's lots of bits that have stayed with me. Like I've still got all my notebook of what we went through and discussed, and there was some things that I wrote down, like particularly like rough structures for like dealing with people and basing things on. So like that I have a structure now when I speak to my seasonal staff each morning. I have a rough structure that I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about this and this, and then we'll go. So it'll be, okay, where are we planning? Because I'll lead a team like running the trial harvest. So it's like, what trials are we planning to combine today? Whereabouts are we? What are we hoping to do? Because I generally keep the same team, if there are any problems the day before and stuff like that, and what we're hoping to achieve by the end of the day. So it's nice to have a little structure to go in and build on, and have notes and ideas to go back and review, because there are some things that I couldn't apply at the time, or not apply at the time, but weren't relevant at the time, that I'm looking at doing again now, because there's been a couple of things where I've been asked. We talked about doing like a bit of presenting or like speaking in front of people, and I've started doing perhaps a couple more things with that this year. So it's nice to have ideas to fall back on and look at there.
I love that. What I hear from that is there's a stat, and I can't remember the details of it, but about our recollection, our ability to recall information. When you go on a training course, it really drops off a cliff sort of within about 24, 48 hours after the course. You come away from it buzzing, but you sleep on it, and the next day you've lost half of the data. And I think the difference here is that there's a practical application that you can build on, and it sticks with you. I've spoken to quite a few mentoring partnerships now where we're talking about the training the process having developed over 18 months ago, but it's still very relevant because it's very tangible expertise that you're calling on. Does that make sense?
I think
Yeah.
as well, like with it being like you could go on some brilliant training courses, for example, like the mentee mentor day we did at the beginning before we were paired back in York, led by John Bullard. Like that was fantastic, and there are still bits of that I go back to when you were mentioning about time and listening. I was like, oh yeah, John was saying about people actively listening and people's time bubbles and how they plan. So those still come back to me. But I think the thing with mentoring that's really nice is that it's stuff you can ask for, stuff that you directly want to apply. So it's like you can talk about it and then you can go and implement it straight away. Whereas sometimes you can be at training course, you're like, oh, that's good, but how would I actually implement it for myself? Whereas this, you can go, I am in this situation. How do we work through it?
Yeah, very immediate, very relevant, bespoke need that gets answered.
Because managing people, is a really complicated thing. And it's one of the few things that lots of people don't get a lot of training in. They go into an organization without any experience of managing people. Then as their career progresses, they find themselves in a position where they are managing people or they're overseeing teams. And there's a little bit of something that's missing there, which is, well, you're very good at reading a balance sheet, but actually how do you motivate people and how do you understand people? Because there's an awful lot of stress associated to managing people, and that stress is felt by them and by you. These are hurdles that need to be overcome. And again, I return to the theme that communication is the thing that runs through all of these relationships and a lot of business processes. So it was really useful to have real world examples and then sort of build some structure around conversations so that people understand what good looks like. We all sort of talk about we need a good outcome or whatever it is, but so tell me exactly. I remember some years ago people were talking about, and still do talk about, things like cleanliness in hospitals and talking about how a lot of cleanliness has sort of reduced in hospitals because people aren't cleaning like they used to, or it's been an outsourced service or whatever it is, and it wasn't like this when matron was in charge. And some of that you can actually see. So I know what the fundamental problem is here. What the fundamental problem is, people don't understand what your interpretation of clean is. It's as simple as that. Whereas when matron was overseeing it, matron was able to say, I don't want a smeary surface, or I don't want, I want everything to gleam. I want everything disinfected, every 5 hours or every 3 days or whatever it was. So people actually understood what good looked like.
Yeah.
And that's communication.
That's a brilliant point. Well, a couple of points that you make there. Certainly reference to the setting out a standard almost. It's sort of it was inherent in matron's job description that she had her standard. And for younger listeners, perhaps the matron scenario is not really going to make a lot of sense to them. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. And you made a point about people management being difficult. It really is the hardest thing. And I think in businesses, in fact, if I look at the example of businesses versus a farming situation, for example, in an office culture, you've got the opportunity to observe how other people do it because you're surrounded by them all of the time, for good or bad reasons. But perhaps in a farming environment or one where you're isolated, you've not got that opportunity to learn by osmosis. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And certainly there's a lot of people who go into farming. So sort of along the way, when I've been dealing with groups of farmers and levy payers, as it were, at AHDB, one of the things that was very clear was that obviously farming is a generational thing. So there were a lot of people who had learned their skills and practices from their sort of forefathers and so on. And but then increasingly there are people coming into farming who have been educated in farming away at colleges and universities. They've traveled much more. They've gone to other parts of the world and seen how systems are developed. And then they bring that sort of knowledge back home. But one of the things that I'm sort of quite conscious of is that the people who are married to farmers or who come into farming in a slightly different route, they need support as well. So they need some help to understand. So often they've got responsibility for critical aspects of the farm. So that might be managing the paperwork, or that might be rearing the calves, or it might be to a specific area that they, because of their relationships, they've found themselves being, a partner to a farmer, a husband or a wife, and there hasn't been any sort of formal support. So to go right back to where Beth started, Beth was talking about the women in agriculture, and these initiatives have been really important because those pick up both the people who are directly managing the farm business, but also it picks up with those people who are just sort of slightly ancillary, but absolutely critical. And I certainly reflect back on my time at ASDB and think that some of that work where meetings were set up and structures were put in place to try and support the levy payer plus one, that delivered huge value. And I've spent time with those people and just seen their beaming faces, just thinking that this was a really good investment of time. This was a really good investment of energy, and they've gone away kind of understanding the critical role that they play in the farm business.
Yeah. You about to say something, Beth?
Yeah, it's also as well, I think, with the managing things on like small farm businesses on farm and the multi-generational thing that can be there, or the marriage relationships or personal relationships that often can be coming on, that can then get a bit with communication, because it can be people become either they bring issues they're having outside of the work area into it. Like if husband and wife, if the husband's annoyed the wife this morning, then maybe when they're out on the farm, she's a bit shorter and snappier because he's already ground her gears inside by leaving the kitchen an absolute bomb site and not cleaning up after he'd made his breakfast or whatever.
Yeah.
Or if you have as well, like people with different ideas. If father thinks one thing should be happening and son thinks another, and you get friction there, that can then into
family
play in
politics.
the communication and the politics. And the other thing John was saying about around like women in agriculture and like food and farming is the more diversity you have in a business, like the more different ideas you have and different ways of approaching stuff, because you all haven't lived everything the same way. If you put in a room a group of people who are all the same age, say went to the same school or similar types of school, universities, play the same sports or have the same hobbies, you'll discover you all have the same ideas. And that's quite nice because you're not getting challenged on your ideas, but it means you're actually only coming up with a small percentage of the options out there. And sometimes it's something that a lot of people aren't always that comfortable with, is being able to sit in a room and have discussions around ideas and have their ideas like not challenged. And it's not necessarily that you're being challenged because you're being wrong, it's because you want to be you want to like justify your thinking behind it and explain your thinking behind it. And someone else might have come up with another option and they're thinking, oh, why can't this option not work? And you need to have a discussion. It might be you can implement some of it, or it might be that the other idea doesn't work because of some tiny thing back in the process that because you've done it several times is inherently necessary, but until you've explained your thinking, someone else in the room doesn't know
it. Yeah, good point.
I was told that some of the most expensive words in farming are It's always been done that way.
in that way.
Yeah, and that's the point that Beth is making. I think is that sort of challenge, wherever that challenge comes from, is generally good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's better things come out of it because you're just having your thinking challenged.
Being able to do that is
Yeah.
about the communication.
Yeah, and it's being able to do that in a productive and a respectful way. It's a way of saying, because it's not a way of going, you're wrong. It's a way of going, have we looked at these alternatives and how do they work? And sometimes it can actually be you need to blend approaches. You need to think, well, no, 50% of the old way of what we do it actually is working is a really good base, but we need to build on these little bits to help enhance and build it. And I think I'm quite lucky. Within my team, like we sit down at the end of, after we've done all the trials harvest and all the trials drilling, we sit down as a team that are responsible for that, and we just review how everything's gone and little tweaks and improvements we might want to make to stuff. And I've known, having worked with the business I've been doing a version of my job for 10 years, and it's how the processes have evolved then. We're still harvesting trials, but we've done things to make it easier, make it run smoother, everything like that. And sometimes I wonder whether it's almost we get, oh, we've done that, we don't need to do it anymore. And actually sitting down and reviewing stuff straight away whilst it's fresh in your head is always good, because it's amazing how when you've, as you said, slept on something for 24, 48 hours more than that, you're like, oh, it all went brilliantly or it all went terribly. And it's like, well, no, actually, you were probably more in the middle. Like some things worked well, some things needed a slight tweak and they'd work really well, and other things that didn't work and we need to work out a better way of doing this.
I think I liken it to childbirth. People forget the pain of childbirth and then so they go and have another one. To forget. Beth, how has the mentoring experience affected your confidence or your decision-making capability?
It's definitely helped me in terms of still reviewing stuff, but trusting my own judgment. Because I think sometimes, whether it's me as a person or there's sometimes things around being a woman and being British and like not wanting to, like those cultural things of not wanting to offend anyone or be too like big and brash, but it's maybe think, no, I do have good processes and what I am doing is a good base and working towards that and working on with that.
And I think from a mentor's point of view, that's it's a really valuable thing to be able to do. If I can reinforce best thinking around sort of good practice and that sort of thing, then that's a real sort of positive, and just sort of building confidence in other areas. If that's what the mentor can deliver in these sort of circumstances, then I think that's hugely valuable.
It's been really helpful and really valuable. There are still bits that I'm like, oh, I still need to work on that and continue with it, but I am getting better at it. Because there are bits, there are still, sometimes it's like, which I think everyone does, is like walking into the events and being like, you're on your own, you go to many agricultural meetings or various meetings, let's make a cup of tea and then we're going to have to start a conversation with someone, but it's like that, okay, let's get in and get settled, and then it's like, starting that, and it's still like, I think everyone still finds it daunting, even the person you think that is networking the room and you think knows it really well, I think they're still daunted when they first walk in.
Even the most experienced, confident, knowledgeable people in the room have got their own sort of personal demon on their shoulder to sort of overcome the nerves of networking in particular.
Yeah.
John, what strengths do you think Beth had and has today?
Oh, I think I'd go back right to this sort of openness thing, that Beth sort of came at it with a real, genuine desire to get as much from this as she possibly could, and so was in that respect was kind of easy to deal with. So because she's a planner and she's organized, she put in the work behind the scenes, and that that was really helpful. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of openness and that's, you can listen to this podcast and you can hear the honesty in her voice, and it's that's very genuine, and I think that those are characteristics that made this work.
Beth, how does that feedback make you feel?
Oh god, it's all about. First of all, I'm like, oh wow, it's really nice to hear. I suppose I could, with going in with openness, I always try and go into stuff because it's one of those, when I go into experiences, I'm like, which I do get teased about by my family sometimes, but it's like, well, there's no point in trying something like half-heartedly. It's like, if I'm going to give something a go, I might as well give it a proper go, because maybe it's the way I am, but it's like, if I can be honest with myself and say I've committed 100% something, if it hasn't worked out, then it hasn't worked out. But if I've tried my very best at it, or put in everything I can from my side, then I know that I can be happy with how I've done that. And yeah, it's really nice to hear.
Good. What would you say then, Beth, to anyone thinking about undertaking mentoring as a way forward?
It's a really valuable process, and it's a great way of like learning new things. I really like with TwoCan the fact that you're paired with people who have similar interests to you and what you want, the areas that you want to work on, and you can ask to work on. And it's really nice to work with someone outside of your known circle and get different ideas inputted and different ways of thinking brought up. And it is definitely something worth doing and looking at investigating.
I think the pre-work that two can do in terms of that sort of matching process, I think that's hugely valuable. And my first experience of speed dating.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of people like yourselves on both as mentees and mentors to really dig deep into the background and the motivations and around the skills and characteristics of individuals. So I think it's that pairing of mindset, and that's where the gold really seems to be in these relationships.
Yeah. I'd also say the other thing with TwoCan that is so good is the training day that you have as a mentee mentor is so good and so well delivered and gets you to think differently and highlights some of the pitfalls you can go into and some of the things around relationships, like the drama triangle. Once you start knowing that, you're like, oh my, like you see that and you're like, I can see that everywhere.
John, what advice would you give to any prospective mentors?
Oh, I think be true to yourself, really, because what's got you into the position of being a mentor is obviously everything that's gone before, and as you say, the sort of the quality of the matching process. So don't leave that at the door when you walk into the room. Take it with you, because that's the thing probably that's going to deliver most to the mentee. And just I think be enthusiastic about it, because I reflect back on the sort of people along during my career, and those that have been most enthusiastic about trying to provide support and help and direction, and those are the people that are really memorable, and the people that really do make a difference. So take the opportunity to make a difference.
Lovely. What
Am I allowed to tack on a bit of advice from particularly mentors coming in? Don't worry, you aren't expected to have all the answers. You are it's quite easy. You just need to have ideas that you can discuss through and bring things through. You don't need to have all the solutions. This is not someone coming to you, for example, for business advice and going, I've got this problem, we need to fix it. It's I want to develop this, and this is an issue I have, but it's a synergistic process. We need to work through it together. It is not on the mentor to have all the solutions to what the issues the mentee is having or the things that the mentee wants to build on.
Yeah, I think that mutual accountability. I mean, you both referenced the training that takes place at the start of the program, and in that training, with both mentors and mentees in the room getting the same training, both hear the same messaging about accountability and the responsibility to one another to work together on it. So that's a great point from you there, Beth. It's been an absolute delight to catch up with you both again. Thanks so much for doing this, and I'm assuming that you have stayed in touch. Did you ever get to meet in person?
No, we haven't had chance. It's just not really lined up.
The day may come, because we are staying in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, superb. Well, I'm sure we will probably need to organise some grand Christmas party and get together for people. So,
oh yes, I'd go to the opening of an envelope. Oh,
would
yeah.
you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know I've been jotting stuff in the diary. I know I'm bobbing onto TwoCan stand at cereals on the second day.
Oh,
so
I'll see you there, hopefully.
Yeah.
I've got tickets for both days, and I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to end up at. But yes, there will be.
I'm at both. I'm working. I'm on our stand, but I have already got in my diary. I've got the second day morning is looking quite busy for me because we're on the KWS stand. We're holding a women in food and farming, like coffee and conversations at 10:30. And then I said Helen emailed a load of former mentees and to come on the stand for 12:30 for TwoCan. So that's probably so much of my second day sorted.
Well, hopefully this episode will air just before cereals. Yeah, the week before. Yeah. So anybody listening, come along and see Beth. And will you be there, John?
No, I'm not planning to be at cereals.
Not planning to be there. Look forward to meeting you, Beth.
Yeah.
And as I say, thanks again for joining me on this. It's been a pleasure to talk to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bev. It's been lovely.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. And thank you, Beth.
Thank you, John, as always. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, as it turned out, this episode is airing just after the cereals event. But I'm pleased to say Beth was the first face I recognised upon entering the event ground on day one, as she stood confidently and carefully talking through the barley trials section on the KWS stand. Given the weather over the previous week, she was just relieved it was all still upright. What a delight it's been to talk to these two. I hope you've enjoyed our chat as much as I did. Well, if you'd like to find out more about how mentoring could impact your career, irrespective of which part you play, mentor or mentee, why not take the time to check out TwoCan Mentoring today? You can find all the details on their website, twocanmentor.co.uk. That's TWOCAN Mentor, all one word. Thanks for listening today. As always, if you've enjoyed the episode, why not leave a comment or share it with a friend? Special thanks to Helen Wyman and the TwoCan team for working with me on the podcast. Hit subscribe or follow for more episodes on mentoring, as well as my usual ramblings. But for now, if it is past your bedtime, well, perhaps it's time to turn in. Until next time.